I have a post-it note next to my computer that says, enjoy the process. It's a great reminder when planning and writing this TV show. Recently, I made another note. It says, fabric first. Instead of choosing the project and expecting the fabric to fit those criteria, I've switched my view, choosing the fabric, then letting the print and or color guide the project choice. That's what happened when I first spied this ombre fabric, a gradated fabric where the green, tan, and pink shades meld from selvage to selvage. In order not to lose the subtle color changes, I decided to make supersized blocks, 20-inch squares, with a fan design to carry out the Asian influence. This simple block is just one way to feature this graceful fabric. Versatile ombre quilting, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Sewing Cabinets, hand-built in the USA by American craftsmen, customized for you. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
This being the third program of Versatile Ombre Quilting, we're going to take a very contemporary supersized approach, working with two quilts with big blocks. And it's perfect for this fabric because the beauty, as I mentioned, fabric first, is in this fabric. Notice this overprint with the gradation from the tan to the purple, or a gradation that really is very bright, vibrant, looking kind of like the Caribbean, or from shades to shades of one hue or color. Same with this example. But the fabric I chose to make the supersized ombre fan quilt is on my table and has been pressed, so we're just about ready to go with this. I want to show you the gradation. You can see half of it. You can see the green, forest green to tan, and on the other side, the tan to the pink. When this fabric is rolled on a bolt in a fabric store, sometimes you can't see the beauty of it. You don't understand what's underneath because it's tucked away. So when you're looking at an ombre section, be sure and open it up so that you can see the gradation from one to the other. Now, if I were to cut a big, or a small block, I should say, to cut a small piece from this fabric, you wouldn't get the beauty of it. So that's why I chose to use almost half of the width for each block. Let's look at the finished quilt. We get 4 different blocks from this fabric, 4 different gradations of color. We're starting down here with the very subtle changes from the light tan to the pink in the corner. And as we move our way up, you'll see now we have the green in the corner and grading out to a darker tan. Again, from just some cuts of fabric, from 2 cuts of fabric, you will get from light to the pink, the very subtle pink, and then one more where we have the more drama, the darker tans and the forest green. So 4 different block variations from one basic cut of fabric, actually 2 cuts, but you'll see that in a minute. Now you have to first make your pattern, and the pattern can be it's called a Dresden plate, a Dresden fan. Sometimes this shape is called a plate. But sometimes, since I also think of a plate being round, we're going to just call it a wedge because we're going to make all our cuts from this piece. Since you cannot find a template this large, I'll show you how you can make your own. On gridded paper, I have drawn a line 19 inches in the length. So mark a line 19 inches, and across the top, center a 7-inch mark. So 19 by 7, and at the lower edge, 1 inch. I'm going to request that you use a fine tip marker. I'm going to use a wider marker just because I would like you to see this better, but use a fine tip marker and then connect the 1 inch and the 7-inch mark. And on both sides. I have cut my wedge out of a template material. You can do whatever you'd like, but this has to be accurate. And I'll show you a little bit later how you can fudge if you need to make it a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, but basically this is your shape. Now if you're working with freezer paper, you could cut this shape out and press it onto your fabric. What I'm going to do right now is trace my design onto the fabric. If we look at the fabric, I've already traced some of the selvage. Sometimes on one side the selvage is printed and the other side isn't. So to make certain that you're not going to include this, since we're using the entire width of the selvage, of the fabric, excuse me, just trim off the selvage markings. And then I like to mark my wedges on the fabric so that I get the deepest green. I align, and I'm going to try to work on a cutting board, I align the wedge on the fabric and trace. Now you could, if you wanted to, cut this with your rotary cutter at this point. Since I have experimented with this, I just find this a little bit more reassuring to mark it first. And then after marking once, then simply flip this and align as close to the bottom as you can. Align the folded area and the wedge. And I'm gone up about 1/8 of an inch, just a hair over, and I have found that this edge now aligns exactly with my first marking. So now I'll just mark the second line and the lower tip and across the top. Now to make the quilt that's behind me, it's a queen size quilt. It had 12 blocks, 3 of each design. You'd need 3.5 yards of the gradated fabric. So you can just see, you just flip and mark all the way down, just alternating as you go. Now I'm going to use a rotary cutter, ruler, and mat, and follow my marks and cut the wedges. By marking the quilt first, or the fabric first, I found that this way I can place the ruler just so it's accurate at all times. So it's accurate for me, or comfortable for all my cuttings. Here's one wedge that has been cut, and you can see from this one wedge that I have the dark green and I have the pink from one cut. Then the second wedge, let me just cut one more for you, would get the lighter shades with the dark colors, the green and the pink, in the corner instead of in the fan area. So take a little time. There's hardly any waste in this particular quilt pattern. As I'm cutting, you'll see there's just a sliver, and this is not exactly accurate to cut the way I'm doing on an angle, but you'll be cutting on a flat surface. And let me just continue to cut down this area. And let me get this corner. Got to give myself a little working room. I'm sure you work like this at home too, just adjusting as you go along. And now I'll cut this area. And as I fold this piece, and I better cut the end, as I fold this piece, you'll see the 2 different colorations that I have here. So to make 12 blocks, you'll need 30 tracings of your templates. And here are the 4 colorations that have been separated out. The 4 colorations to make the fans. And now I'll show you how to stitch these together. The first sewing step is to stitch across the top of the wedges to create the point. As I mentioned, there are 5 wedges that create a fan, and we're going to take each of the wedges, stack them, and do chain stitching. So I've stacked just a sampling of some of the wedges, and I would meet right sides together, start sewing at the edge, sewing across the top, chain stitching all of the wedges. Just 1/4 of an inch seam allowance is all that is needed. I like to start sewing at the cut edge and sew to the fold. I have better results that way. And as I end one wedge, I simply grab the next one, meet the cut edges, 1/4 of an inch seam. I have my needle set over to the right so I achieve this 1/4 of an inch seam, and you just chain and chain and chain as many stitches, or wedges I should say, as you'd like. I've just done a small sampling for you right now, but they'll all be connected together just like old-fashioned hot dogs, and we'll clip them apart. In the first step of pressing, I like to do just finger pressing, because the cottons react so well to the pressure of your fingernail, or just the pressure of your fingers pressing together. I press this open, and then at the very tip you'll notice a fold. Grab a hold of that fold and turn it to the right side. Then you could use your favorite notion to get the shape just perfectly, and you'll do this to all of your wedge shapes. Now you need to do a real press. And the key of working with this press is to make sure that the seam allowance is down the center of the wedge. And to make that happen, we're going to use a ruler that has a 45-inch angle from a corner, and it would be this corner. So I'll flip this around, place the corner of the ruler in the wedge, and make certain that the seam is aligning. I'll put this down on my pressing mat, make sure everything is aligned, and then just gently remove the ruler and press, top press. Top pressing really from the wrong side of the fabric. After you've done this pressing, we'll just do one more to show you because this has saved me so much time in the latter part of making the fans to make sure that those seams are pressed in the correct direction. After you do the pressing, then straight stitching is needed. And the straight stitching to put 5 wedges together, meeting the right sides, and begin stitching at the top, not the bottom, so everything lines up. And you just stitch, as I've done in this sample, with a 1/4 of an inch seam. Press the seam allowance open, and you can see that that seam will not be visible from the right side. Create 5 wedges, so 5 strips together, and in this next step, I'm going to show you how to cut the block and place the wedges on the block. You're going to be cutting squares that are approximately 20 to 20.5 inch square. You'll be using the full 44 to 45 inch width of fabric and pin in place. Now, if the fans do not quite fit, you can kind of fudge a little bit because you'll have some seam allowances at the edge. You can move it over or take a lesser seam allowance if needed. But now you're ready to top stitch. At this point, you change your thread color to a clear monofilament thread. I like to use a nylon monofilament thread and a Metafill needle. The two go together. Let me show you the back of one of the stitches of the block so you can see what's going to be happening. It doesn't look like you've used any stitching on this front, but when we go to the back, you would use matching thread to the fabric, but you can see little blind hem or blanket stitching. The zig goes into the fan, the zag goes right along the seam or the fold. Because you're going to be working with clear thread, really it's very easy to stitch because if you've lost your way, no one will ever be the wiser. Now, you will see all my stitching because I'm using the black thread. But as I'm stitching along the black thread, along the seam, and then the little zig goes right into the fan. And you just take time to go around all the little points of the fan. And I'll again show this to you close up, but it's a very fast stitching, and with that clear thread, not black thread, you wouldn't worry about seeing any of this. Now to shape the last portion of this block will be to cut a small quarter circle to fit into this area. The quarter circle has a seam allowance that has been finished. Cut a 6-inch square of leftover fabric. Create a 5.5 inch circle, draw a 5.5 inch circle around this, and I've used a compass to draw this. Then with fusible interfacing, meet right sides together so that the fusible interfacing rough side is facing me. Trim around the edges after doing the sewing, and then with your ruler cut it into 4ths. And I've divided that into 4 pieces. Now some little trimming is needed, a little pressing, and I'm going to trim away the excess interfacing. And then roll the interfacing to the underside. Now I'm not pressing this right now for you, but let me show you one that has been pressed. Nice curve is in place, and then simply position the quarter circle around the edge and do the same top stitching. Here's a close-up of the finished block. The gradation of the fabric and these sewing steps make it a very easy, attractive block to quilt. Let's change directions, this time choosing an ombre fabric with great color intensity. When I opened this fabric, the gradation from purple to yellow, then back to purple, brought to mind an Amish shadow quilt. I knew in an instant that another supersized block could easily be made with only 2 fabrics, the ombre and a solid black. For quilting drama, pair ombre fabrics with this simplified block technique. When we look at this fabric, it's slightly different than the first fabrics we worked with through the series. Instead of going from gradating from selvage to selvage, it gradates to the middle and then back again. It's vibrant. You can get these in many different colors, and you can see why I chose the complement of the black to pair it with my Amish shadow. This is a fast technique because the traditional Amish shadow block is created by strip piecing several colors together and pairing it with the black. Here we just have one fabric to get the simple gradation theme. Now there are 4 block variations that you'll achieve when working with this pattern technique or this quilting technique. There are 2 variations of the yellow and 2 variations of the bluey plum. And you can see on this particular yellow that the brightness is in the corner, where the first one, the brightness was at the edge. And here's the 4th subtle gradation. It's a great quilt for guys, for contemporary sewing and quilting, and I'll show you how to do this. Now, for those of you who've been quilting for a while, you know that most of the time we cut fabrics across the grain from selvage to selvage. Not this time. This is one of the few times we're going to cut it into lengthwise grains into fours. To make the 12 blocks that you just saw of my quilt, the laugh quilt size, I needed 1 yard and 1/4 of fabric. And I cut off the extra selvages, trimmed off these extra selvage along the edge so that I had beautiful fabric from length to length, and then cut it the lengthwise, not the crosswise. Divide the width that you have left into 4, and my sections happen to be 10.5 inches. 10.5 by the 45-inch length, and I have little shorter ones here today because of my table length. Then with each 10.5 inch by 45-inch length, you're going to cut a piece of black fabric the same size and meet right sides together, stitch the 2 panels together with 1/4 of an inch seams along each long edge. I'm going to flip to this side because you'll be able to see my markings a little bit more clearly. Now you're going to cut these into triangle shapes. Now you can use a ruler with a 45-degree angle, or you can use a wedge, and I'll show you each of these. I'm placing the 45-degree ruler along the top, and then I would mark, making sure it's accurate to the point, mark 1, cut. And then flip this and rotate it so that I can now cut, now I have to do this a couple of times, cut the second wedge, making certain that where I ended is where my ruler is now starting, and then cut once again. And then you just keep flipping and rotating so that you would cut your next piece. Out of each 45-inch length, you're going to get 3 blocks. Or you could use a ruler that's just made for this purpose. That might be faster. Then with your rotary cutter, you can cut your wedges. Now I prefer to mark them first, just to make certain that I have done it correctly, and then go back and make a cut. And I'll cut one more. All the blocks will be made in the same manner. There'll be just a little bit of stitching that is at this corner, about 2 to 3 stitches, and you open it up. And presto, here's your block. You can see the beautiful gradation that you have. And you'll have, as I mentioned, different colorations depending upon which way the gradation ended up. Now you can lay it out in this basic Amish shadow technique that you see behind me. And here are 2 illustrations of other options, making a wave layout or a point-on-point layout with squares in the middle. So you have the option. You can use leftover ombre fabric, this time cutting it on the cross grain, the traditional way of cutting an inner border, to see how it gradates that inner border from purple to the yellow and back again. This is a quick quilt, supersized ombre. Those of us who sew and quilt find our inspiration in a variety of places. Today's guest during the Nancy's Corner segment found her inspiration at the library in a book written in 1922 entitled, "Do You Want Your Daughter to Marry a Farmer?" Please meet Lori Hurd. Lori is the author of the Farmer's Wife Sampler Quilt book. And Lori, this book had its origins a long time ago.
Yes, I wanted to move into the country. We were living in a small town, And I went to the library and found this little book. And
It had 68 stories.
yes, 68 stories from women who entered a contest from the Farmer's Wife magazine. It was published in the early 1900s. And they asked women, did they want their daughter to marry a farmer? And they offered prizes for the top 68
Entrance.
entrants, yes. And I took 56 excerpts from those letters and
Created
made a
this
quilt
quilt.
book.
This is a beautiful quilt, Lori. And you have
Thank
how
you.
many blocks in it?
111 blocks, and they're all 6-inch size.
And they have they tell a story from the notes that were written, or not notes, but letters that were written
Yes.
in 1922 from the contest. And Lori selected 3 of the letters to read, one from Missouri, Minnesota, and Virginia, and they're so sweet and charming. We thought we should read them and then show some of the blocks that you made to correlate with the letters.
Okay, here's the first one. It's from Missouri. I love the farm, and I had rather be known as a farm woman than by any other name. I want my daughter to marry a farmer. I hope, if she is so fortunate, that he may be college or university trained. I want my daughter to bear hardships more bravely, not to be relieved of them, to meet difficulties more sturdily, to face motherhood as the heritage of the Lord. I want her to help build a home in which children may grow, who will someday carry on the ideals and continue the service that I shall have to leave unfinished. Cities have produced men whose work one must admire, but think of the combination of strength and tenderness that can swing an axe or a corn knife all day, and at night bathe a tiny baby and put it to sleep in its crib. And one of the blocks that I had to go with this is jackknife.
And here's a close-up of that block. It's very nicely executed, and it's just a charming color combination.
Here's another story from Virginia. I was born and raised on a farm, but grew up knowing absolutely nothing about it. My parents, educated, cultured Virginians of the old school, were not disposed to let me go over the place. If I even so much as set foot in the barn lot, my father said, "Now, little daughter, run to the house with your mother." There were few good roads, no cars, no telephones, so the farm was jail to me. I hated it. But then a change came. My mother died, father was an invalid, and my own health bad. He and I spent a winter in the city, and there the scales fell from my eyes. I saw his longing for the old home, and I felt my longing, so back we came. His joy was indescribable, and mine was almost equal. Life was a revelation to me. How near I had come to losing the very best opportunities ever offered to me. And with this one, one of the blocks was Homeward Bound.
And the coloration that you used here is just a nice combination using kind of colors of that era.
Yes.
Very good. We have one more to read from you, and this lady, you didn't know necessarily, you just had their initials of their names.
Right, they didn't
But you're kind of
publish.
assuming that this woman originated from Ireland.
I believe so. Comes from Minnesota, and she says, "Of the good things I desire of this daughter of mine are peace, a love of nature, and time for quiet, happy thoughts. Can they be had by any other class of working people as easily by the woman on the farm? She doesn't rush to finish her work that she may spend a day bargain hunting, a day of hurry, worry, and me-first thoughts, of spending money she shouldn't spend and gazing at things she wants and can't have. No, she may sit on the front porch a bit while she sews or mends or perhaps reads her most helpful magazine. To me, that means The Farmer's Wife. She will see and feel and hear the beauty of the world, her world, and with an unruffled spirit, she will go in and get supper for her hungry brood." And one of the blocks I have for this one is Mother's Dream.
Again, what a great combination of using the story and putting this all together. Laura, you found out that of the 7,000 people that entered this contest, wasn't it 7,000?
Yes, it was 7,000.
That what percentage again was it that wanted their daughters to marry farmers?
It was 96% wanted their daughters to marry farmers.
Now, although most of us no longer live in the farm area, we kind of relate to some of this, and it's just charming to read these stories and also to make quilt blocks that perhaps would relate to the stories. So I appreciate you sharing this with us, your beautiful quilt, these charming stories, and
Thank you.
keep on quilting.
Yes, thank you.
And I appreciate you watching Sewing with Nancy today and for watching this series on versatile ombre quilting. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.
Nancy has written a fully illustrated book entitled Versatile Ombre Quilting, which includes all the information from this 3-part series. It's $14.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2307. Order item number BK2307, Versatile Ombre Quilting. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at sewingwithnancy.com for more information on this program. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Cabinets, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Classe Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman